Welcome to Caring Community with your hosts, Jay and Diane West. In this community, creative initiatives are welcomed. A culture of transformation is normal, and miracles are expected. Welcome to Caring Community.
Hello, I'm Jay West, and this is Caring Community. Welcome to our show today. A little different format because normally I'm sitting here with my wife and we're usually interviewing somebody, but her schedule didn't permit her to come in today, and so I just thought I'd do a couple of shows, just myself, and sharing personal stories that would tie in with caring and helping other people. Let me tell you up front, though, that this is not about me. While the stories are involved and I'm involved with them, it's about literally helping other people, serving, being an assistant, courteous, nice, whatever adjectives you want to use to help explain the process. Some of the stories I'm sharing today are coming out of two of my books. One of them is called Downloads from Heaven, and the other one is called Willing to Yield. And you can order these books from me and using the email address that will scroll across the screen later on in the show. So let me launch by telling this story. As we sit here today, it's a cold January day. We've had a lot of snow, and as several years ago, in a similar situation here in the city, it has snowed a lot. In fact, it was snowing the day I got a phone call. And the phone call was from a pastor in the city of a larger church, and he knows me, and he called me and he asked me to go pray for somebody that was in the hospital. This person was in a manual hospital, and they were on a respirator, and they were in a coma. Now keep in mind, it's a cold, snowy day. The hospital is approximately, on a normal driving day, 40 minutes from my house. I knew it was probably going to take an hour, and honestly, deep inside, I just didn't want to do it. And on top of that, I know this pastor pretty well. He has a large staff, he have a lot of volunteers, and I'm thinking certainly they could ask one of the other volunteers or staff members to go. But out of my mouth came, of course, I'd be happy to help you. And so I had a friend help me ride with me, and a few hours later we rode up to the hospital and got to a manual hospital, walked in and met this man's wife and his brother. He was in intensive care, he was on a respirator, he had tubes down his throat, and there was a monitor in the room that was displaying some of the vital statistics. Two of them were his blood pressure, which was pretty high, and his heart rate, which was kind of low. And every 2 or 3 seconds, a light would blink on the monitor, and there would be a small beep sound and go beep, beep, beep. And that's the only sound in the room. And so I went in and just began to do what I normally do. I invite the presence of God into the room. I'm praying for him. I may quote a Bible passage or two. I'm speaking healing. I'm declaring healing. And it's just me talking and the monitor going beep, beep, beep. And at one point, I noticed that his heart rate was dropping and his blood pressure was getting even higher. And I began to worry, and I thought, oh, good golly, this man could die while I'm praying for him. What would that look like? What would that look like on my resume? All the things that could go wrong started to go wrong. And I'm thinking about all sorts of catastrophic, disastrous kind of things. Now, keep in mind, the people in the room don't know I'm having these thoughts. I'm not even sure they're aware of the monitor. But I'm still praying, but I'm having these thoughts. And God begins to speak to me. He says, don't look at the monitor, Jay. Stay focused on me. We walk by faith, not by sight. He's quoting Bible passages right out of his Bible. He wrote it. And so at this point, I am praying out loud. I'm watching the monitor. I'm worrying, and I'm trying to listen to God. I am multitasking big time at this point. But at some point, I was able to get back on track, past the monitor, not looking at the readings. And at some point, I felt released. And I went out into the hallway with his wife and his brother, and I thanked them for the honor of letting me pray. And I said, I'm a friend of your pastor. I would be happy to come back at another time if you'd like me. Here's my cell number. Just call me. Well, the next morning she called. But I could tell there was, her tone was a little different in her voice. And I said, well, what's going on? She said, well, we'd like you to come back. I said, okay, I'd be happy to come back. She goes, but there's something you should know. I said, what is it? She said, well, he woke up and he wants to meet you. I said, he woke up? She said, yes, he woke up. And so I made my way back up to the hospital later on that day or the next day, I can't remember for sure. And when I went into his room and met this man for the very first time, his doctor was also in there. And his wife shared with him that I had been there to pray and everything else. And the doctor, who's been at Emmanuel Hospital for like 20 years, spoke clearly and directly to me. He said, I've seen lots of people in comas in this condition before, and I've never seen them wake up that fast. And when I thought about that, I thought, what would have happened had I stayed engaged with the monitor instead of with the prayer? What would have happened had I focused on his blood pressure and his heart rate rather than getting back into prayer? Things might have turned out totally different. And in your life and in my life, there's a lot of beeps going off. They're going beep, beep, and they might be going beep, 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 beep. And I call them attractions and distractions. And there's attractions and distractions going off in your life and my life that come in just as we have the opportunity to provide care for somebody, to show compassion. The Bible says in the book of Jude, it says, when you show compassion, you make a difference in somebody else's life. And honestly, I didn't want to go to the hospital that day, but because I went up, and again, it's not to do anything to do with me, I was just an instrument of God's grace, but I made a difference. And it made a difference in the doctor's life. And so there's lots of caring that happens through healing prayer. And some of those happen through words of knowledge, which I'll talk about in a little while. And some of them happen through just providing care or just being nice to somebody. I remember one day I was going through Target. I was checking out at Target. And my credit card didn't work in the app on the side where you can use it, where you can put your credit card in. And so the lady behind the counter, sweet black lady, just a lovely lady, took my card and she scanned it and it didn't work. And she said, no, that's funny. And she tried it again, it didn't work. I said, let me try. She said, okay. So I reached over and went, bzz, and it worked immediately. And she said, my, you have the Midas touch. I said, yeah, maybe I do. And then I said, no, you know what? I got the Target touch. And she smiled real big, and she said, yeah, I think you do. And then boldness came in. I got courageous. I said, you know what? I think I have the God touch. She said, yes, I think you do have the God touch. And when she said that, her hand came up on her side of the aisle there, on the other side of the register, and her hand came up for a high five, and we just did a high five right there. I would illustrate, but I'm tied into a microphone, but she just spun around in the aisle on her side, and I didn't want to be outdone, so I just spun around in the aisle on my side, and it was kind of cute and comical, but everybody in our row backed out and moved away. And then we went on to have a nice conversation about God and her life and her church and my church, and we talked for maybe 10 minutes. And at the conclusion, this is what she said to me. She said, I was having a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. I came into work late today and my boss chewed me out, and I was only a few minutes late, but I've worked here for like 8 or 9 years. I didn't deserve that kind of treatment. I've been loyal, I've been dedicated, I've been committed, and he laid into me, and then you came through my lane, and now I can make it for the other 7.5 hours. Sometimes it's just doing something nice. Sometimes it's acting goofy and doing a high five in a circle. I don't know what it is, but it's being cheerful. It's providing care. It's operating in a caring community, if you will. Another story is I was in Chicago ministering in a Lutheran church. Everybody say, God bless the Lutherans. And I was ministering in a fairly big church of 300 or 400 people in an evening service. And I was sitting, the church was laid out in a fan-shaped way, and they didn't know I was the guest speaker. I kind of like to go incognito. And I was sitting way over on the side, and I got an impression that there's a family way over on the left side, and they had lost their job. The husband had lost his job, and money was getting tight, and I should go offer to pray for them. Like, how am I going to find them? And I felt like God said, I'll show you when you get over what they're wearing and everything. Sure enough, I got over, he pointed them out. I tapped them on the shoulder. I didn't want to introduce them. They were in the middle. I didn't want to interrupt them. They were in the middle of the worship set, but I tapped them on the shoulder. I said, hey, I'm from Omaha. I'm sitting on the other side of the room, and I got an impression that maybe you're out of work. Sure enough, he's out of work, and things were getting tight financially, and they had a couple of little kids, and I prayed with them, and God said, bless them financially. Give them something financially to help them. And in those days, whenever I traveled, I took a blank check with me in my wallet. Every single trip I went on, I took a blank check, and I'm thinking, okay, God, how much do you want me to give him? You just tell me the amount and I'll write the check. And he said, you decide. And I'm like, me? I got to decide? I don't know their needs. I don't know their situation. I don't know what's going on in their life. What should I give? And God said, you decide. And I thought about it, a family of 4 and groceries, and it just popped in my head, $250. So I got their names, I spelled their name, wrote them out a check for $250 and handed it to them. And that was that. And I went on and had a great weekend there. Now, what you got to understand, in those days when I was traveling, I never wrote an appeal letter. What does that mean for those who are traveling? Well, lots of times ministers go into places and they get email addresses or some other contacts, physical addresses or whatever, and then they write letters and try to get money from you in the future. Well, I never did that. I never signed up anybody for an email list, and I never wrote an appeal letter. So when money would come in, it was always a surprise. And it was interesting that I went home that week and went to the mailbox on Friday, and the church that I just talked about where I prayed for the person, well, that church sent me a check in the mail and just said, we know you go to a lot of smaller churches and we just want to bless you. We want to encourage you. We haven't had you in to speak yet, but we're going to. And inside was a check for $2,500. Now keep in mind, I had just given away $250 5 days earlier to a total stranger. The Bible says when you give to the poor, you make a loan to God, and God repays the loan. And I wasn't even thinking about that verse when I blessed the family. I was just saying, I'm just trying to be nice. I'm trying to provide a caring community. Then I got another check from another church in town where I was doing seminars here in town on a weekly basis, and they would take a love offering for me on a Tuesday night, and they would mail a check on Wednesday, and normally I'd get the check on Friday, and it'd be for $200 or $300, but this week it was for $1,200 or $300 and something. And I was like, well, this must be a mistake. So I called them on the phone, excuse me, and I said, I think you all sent me too much money this week. And they said, let us check, we'll get back to you. They checked, they got back to me and said, no, actually somebody came in and they made a $1,000 donation just for you, said they just wanted to bless you. Why am I sharing these stories? Because there's something in the Bible here, it's truth, that when you give to others, he gives back to you, and it's always more than what you gave. It's a blessing, it comes back to you. I didn't look for it, I didn't ask for it. But God just supernaturally dropped it in my lap and did these things. And in Matthew chapter 16, there's a story about words and knowledge. I'm just going to share it real briefly with you. Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he says, who do men say that I am? And he says, some say Elijah, some say another prophet, Jeremiah or whatever. And Jesus got real specific. He said, who do you say that I am? And Peter answered, he said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered, flesh and blood did not reveal that to you, but my Father who is in heaven. In other words, Jesus had never told them that, never taught it. But they got the message. Peter got the message. It was a word of knowledge. It was knowledge about something that he knew nothing about, that was just dropped into his lap and given to them at that very moment. Given to Peter at that very moment. That's what I got when I was in Chicago. I got a word of knowledge about this situation. Excuse me. So I was thinking about that. I was thinking about how the Lord spoke to us when we lived in Houston one time, and he said, I want you to sell your car and give the proceeds of your car to a poor family in your church. And I was thinking, you know what? That's like almost too much to ask. First of all, we only have one car. I'll be honest, we only have one car. What am I going to do in Houston, Texas with one car? I'm going to sell it, give it away, not going to have any car? You can't walk anywhere in Houston, right? It's a big place. So I was at this gathering, and they had just taught about Acts chapter 2, where they have all things in common. And it seemed to tie in with that. And I asked one of our leaders to pray with me, and he prayed that my car would sell for more than the appraised value. Now, in those days, I was driving a 1979 AMC Spirit. I don't know if you remember those cars, but they're not around anymore, and there's probably a reason for that, but I won't go into that. And my AMC Spirit was oxidized, and it kind of shook as you drove, and I would pray in it when I'm driving it, and that way I'd be praying in the Spirit. So anyway, I through a mutual friend, the very next day, it was a strange situation. This guy called me on the phone, and he goes, I got somebody you should meet. I said, who is he? He says, he's a used car salesman. I said, well, I need a car salesman right now, because I'm supposed to give my car away. I'm supposed to sell it. I'm supposed to do something. He goes, this is a Christian used car salesman. I go, whoa, that's like an oxymoron. A Christian used car salesman? It doesn't make sense to me. I've never heard of such a thing. But I go and meet this guy, and he checks out my car. He said, it's probably worth a whopping $250. I'm thinking, $250? It's got to be worth more than that. He says, no, it's worth $250. But I do have a guy that does higher appraisals. He's coming in tomorrow. Why don't you bring your car back tomorrow and we'll see what we can do. I said, okay. His name is Robert. Robert calls me on the phone the next morning and he goes, Jay, I got a buyer for your car. I said, great, sell it to him. He said, well, if I sell it to him, I'll have to charge you my commission. I like, you're not going to charge me your commission if I sell it? He said, no. When was the last time a car salesman gave up its commission? You know, so I take it over to this guy, and he's one of these guys, he's not very technical. He literally walks around and tapped the car and kicked all 4 tires, and he goes, I'll give you $600 for it. $600, this is amazing. Now you got to keep in mind, this car has now sold in less than 24 hours with no marketing, no for sale sign, no advertising, nothing, and it's sold, the prayer was it would sell for more than appraised value. So, okay, I take it to Robert, and Robert does the paperwork for free. And he looks at me and says, what are you going to drive? I said, I don't know. We're doing what God said to do. We sold the car. I got $600. We're going to give it to somebody in our church that's struggling, but we don't have a car. And Robert says, well, I got this car over here. I give to missionaries, and I give to employees, and I give to whatever. Anybody needs a car. You can drive it for as long as you need it. I can drive it for as long as I need it? Yeah, you can have it for free. Just put gas in it. You're just giving it to me? He says, yep, just giving it to you for as long as you need it. And it was a Buick Regal Landau, something or other, power windows and locks and cruise control and a nice radio and a cassette. And, you know, we didn't have CDs yet, okay? And it was a beautiful car. Well, my wife and I went out for dinner that night in Houston. We went to a restaurant called the Black Eyed Pea. And at that restaurant, you know, we're still really wrestling. God, even though you've done all this, and even though you provide a car, are we really supposed to give this $600 away? Because that's a lot of money for us. And it's like, okay, so as we prayed over our meal, we said, Lord, if we're supposed to give this $600 away, confirm it. So we have our meal. At the end of the restaurant, we asked for the check, and the waitress says there's no check. We said, what do you mean there's no check? There's got to be a check. She says, no, there's no check. I said, no, there's some mistake here. There's a check. She said, well, honestly, somebody else in the restaurant has paid for your meal. Really? So we're looking around. This place is really crowded. And so we just see going out the door a guy that kind of looks like my wife's orthodontist. She had braces before we got married. She took them off when we got married, and she put them back on. And I like, is that him? So we're not sure. So I call him up the next day. I said, I have a couple strange questions. Were you at the Black Eyed Pea restaurant last night? He said, yes, I was. I said, did you happen to see us? He said, yes. I said, now the strange question is, did you pay for our meal? And he answered, he said, yes, we did. I said, why did you pay for our meal? He said, we saw you pray, and we're believers, and when you prayed, God prompted us to buy your meal. Now keep in mind, the prayer was, God, if you still want us to give this $600 away, confirm it. That was our confirmation. So we immediately took the money over to the people in our church that we felt instructed to give the $600 to, and Robert helped me with future cars, and we've been blessed with cars multiple times since that time. What is the story about? It's about listening to God, hearing the still small voice. Was it an audible voice? No. Some people have said they've heard an audible voice. I've never heard an audible voice. If he wants to speak to me audibly, that's fine, but I've never heard one. It's just kind of the inside in my heart kind of voice, the impression that you get. And so I respond to that voice, and it's quite a story. And the people got their money, and we got the car, and it was a blessing. I'm going to share another one with you as time permits. Same scenario in Houston, Texas. My wife and I are driving to work one day, and we're listening to the radio, and a church has burned down on the other side of Houston, and they've lost everything. And they're going to be moving into another warehouse-type facility or something. They need a number of things, and they're listing the things on the radio station that they could use. And one of them was a refrigerator. And I turned to my wife as we were driving. I can still remember it. I said, we have a refrigerator. There's one in our kitchen. Now, keep in mind, it's full of food, and it's in our kitchen, and we don't have a backup, but we have one. And we just agreed right there, we should offer our refrigerator. Now, this is a bold move. Okay, this is a bold move because we don't have another refrigerator, and we don't have a plan B. We don't know what we're going to do, but God knows. And so we just began praying. That was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We're praying, saying, okay, God. And I called the pastor on the phone. I said, we have a refrigerator for you. And he said, well, I can come get it, but I can't come till Saturday. I said, that's great because I don't have another refrigerator. I got to figure out what to do. He said, okay, I'll come on Saturday. So Thursday comes, and we get a phone call from a member of our church. Now, keep in mind, we have told nobody. We're not like blabbing it to everybody and trying to outmaneuver God or whatever. We're just, Diane and I are just praying about this and believing God and trusting Him in the process. And this lady named Nancy, she's still a friend of mine on Facebook to this day. She calls me on the phone. She goes, Jay, my husband and I are buying a new refrigerator. And ours is only like a couple of years old. And we've been praying what to do with our older refrigerator. It's only 2 years old. And every time we pray, we think about you. So I thought I'd call you, do you need a refrigerator? I said, Nancy, you do not know how much I need a refrigerator. This is amazing. And I kind of share some of the story with her without even giving her the dates. And she goes, well, here's the deal. Our new refrigerator is being delivered on Saturday. Would it be okay if I scheduled the delivery men then to take our refrigerator from our house to your house on Saturday? I said, Nancy, Saturday is perfect. It's absolutely perfect. So she delivers the refrigerator. What we decided to do was, instead of taking the newer, nicer refrigerator into our house and moving the other one out and taking all the food in and out, we just gave the refrigerator that Nancy donated to us to that church. But God supernaturally provided as we stepped out in faith, making an offer to provide care for somebody else. And in this case, I had only met this pastor once or twice. I didn't know anybody in his church. I'd never been to his church. I mean, if you lived in Houston, to drive from one side of Houston to the other is quite different than where we live here in Omaha. I mean, even to this day, I mean, we've been in Omaha now 20 years, and people complain about the traffic and the drive, and we say, hey, you should live in Houston. You should live in Dallas, where we live. You should live in San Diego, where I grew up. You want to know about traffic? Let me tell you about traffic. And it's a long ways. You can drive for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and still be in Houston. I mean, it's just really spread out. It's the fourth largest city in the United States. My point is, God provided. He did something supernatural. He did something amazing simply because we were willing to care. Again, it's not about us. It's not about Jay and Diane. These stories are in my books. I'm going to reference again. Downloads from Heaven. That's about hearing God's voice for today. And my great producer, who's filming this right now, Mike Wallace, boy, I just love him. He's a great guy here at KPAO, great station. He'll put my email address on the bottom at some point, and you can email if you're interested in these books. Willing to Yield is also here. And normally, you know what? I can't say anything. Just email me. I'm not going to tell you the price or anything. I can't tell you the price. But what I want to do is give them away. But anyway, just email me, and we'll talk about that then. And you can be edified and encouraged through the books. I just want to bless you and encourage you. So here's how I want to conclude. I want to remind you of the first story I told you, where the monitor was going beep, 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 beep. And that was literally the only sound in the room when I walked in. And in your life and in my life, there are beeps going off. There's noise all around us. There's Facebook, there's LinkedIn, there's Instagram, there's, you just go on, there's Snapchat, there's just all sorts of, there's our job, there's our cell phones, and we think we can't live without them, and other times we want to throw them away because we want to get rid of them because of the constant battle to our attention for this little thing, grabbing our attention all the time. And we miss these opportunities. I love this quote, the opportunity of a lifetime must be seized within the lifetime of the opportunity. And sometimes the opportunity is very narrow. The window of opportunity is very small. And you're wrestling inside of you because you've got a schedule. You know you've got a deadline. You've got a meeting to get to, and yet somebody is right in front of you that needs help. Right in front of you that needs help, and you're like, what do I do? Because our schedules are so demanding and the beeps are going off all around us. But God may be speaking to you. God may be asking you to touch somebody else's life. He might be asking you to pay for the coffee of the person in front of you or behind you at Starbucks or Scooters or some other place in town. He might be asking you to buy somebody's groceries, which I've done and I'll share in the next session. And he might be asking you to do something, just be nice. Put your arm around somebody. Offer to pray for somebody. Or compliment somebody. I complimented a lady the other day in a grocery store, and she was pretty much overweight, and I complimented her, and I just said, you have a really nice smile. And she's like, her whole countenance just changed. And I said, in fact, you are a beautiful young lady. And I could tell her face kind of got red. And like I said, she's a little bit overweight. But the compliment to bless her was all that was needed that day. There was none of these other things that happened that I've shared. It was just a compliment. Just being nice to somebody, whether they're having a tough day or not. They're at work, they're going through their routine. They've got a boss too. They've got situations in their life. They've got struggles. They can't make ends meet on their paycheck, whatever it is. Life is happening to them. And you smile. And you share in our community some care with a compliment. And you bless them. And as Jude says, as showing compassion on some will literally make a difference. So today, as we conclude, I just want you to remind you, look for the opportunities. Galatians says, as you have the opportunity, do good unto all men, especially the household of faith. You don't have to go looking for them. I think if you prayed in the morning and said, hey, God, give me an opportunity to bless somebody, encourage somebody, he'd open up a door wide enough to drive a semi-truck through it. Just to encounter one person. Every day, just one person. I get compliments on my Facebook page weekly from 15 to 20 to 30 people sometimes saying, I never post anything, I never say anything, but you always write something positive every day that encourages me. That's my goal. Every single day on LinkedIn, Facebook, I try to write something positive to encourage other people. So with those thoughts in mind, I thank you for tuning in today. God bless you, and look for those opportunities to encourage somebody else, bless somebody else, and make their life just a little bit better. This is Jay West saying, God bless you, have an amazing day, an amazing week, and keep on being a part of Caring Community.